Welcome everybody to Q's Meet the Podcasters. Give it up for all of our podcasters here today. Excellent. Thank you so much for being here. We absolutely love you. We love that technology has allowed educators to share their voice, to be able to share their passion out to the world, whether you're just using a podcast to share your voice, you're using StreamYard to share your face and video, whatever you're doing, it's super important to be able to share what you're doing in your class. And I want you to think, while you are listening to the stories behind the podcast, the whys behind the podcast, I want you to think to yourself, do I have those feelings too? Do I have those moments in my class that I want to share out to the world? How do I do that? What equipment do I need? At the end, we're going to allow you to ask questions of how our podcasters got started, what equipment they're using, and how you can begin as well. My name is Joe Marquez. I'm Q's Director of Academic Innovation, and I'm so excited to be able to be your host for today's session. And at the end, our podcasters are going to be around, so if you want to go up and say hello to them, talk to them a little bit more, maybe they have some stickers to hand out, please definitely find your podcasters, come on up and shake their hands and tell them hello. So these are going to be the podcasts that we're going to be looking at today. Beer EDU is going to start us off. Then Cappuccino Mic Drop is going to follow. Teacher is going to follow right behind that. Unfortunately, Finding Our Tribe can't be here today, but we want to give them a shout out. And then Make Learning Magical is going to be next. Real Teaching 101. And then at the end, if there's time, we're definitely going to share the Sons of Technology podcast as well. So, our first guest, come on right up here. It's going to be Kyle Anderson from the Beer EDU podcast. Kyle, how you doing, my friend? I like the jacket, man.
I think I know someone else with the same one.
I think so, man. You know what? I'm so embarrassed. We were the same thing.
Yeah.
All right. So
it is what it is.
So, Kyle, Beer EDU podcast. No, I'll tell you right now, right off the bat, how many times have people come up to you and said, is this about how to make beer?
About as many times as people have said to me, Mr. Anderson from the Matrix movie in my life. So quite a few.
Oh, well, so I know that it's not about making beer, but tell me a little bit about the name, how the podcast came about, and what is its theme? Like why is it called Beer EDU?
So I'm going to talk to the audience for a second, whether you're sitting watching the stream or if you're out here right now. How many times have you gone with your coworkers after a long week on a Friday, get to your favorite watering hole, and you say, we're not going to talk about work, but then that's all you do? So I see a few hands, I see some smiles, hear some laughs. So Ben Dixon, my partner on this show, he and I had been thinking of a way we wanted to do some sort of podcast, and we wanted it to be unique, have a theme, not just be another two educators talking. So then one day, like some of your best ideas, I was in the shower getting ready for work, and this idea came in my head. That's the podcast idea. And I text him, and Ben is notorious for, you text him and he doesn't answer for 6 hours. He texts me back 30 seconds later at 5:30 in the morning and said, that's gold, we're in.
Well, I know Ben, and yes, definitely. But it sounds to me like it could have been called Shower EDU Podcast. That could have been kind of weird, right? That
would have been awkward and strange. So no, we did not do that.
No, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about your format, right? Because there's lots of different formats in podcasts. Mm-hmm. What is your podcast format?
So Ben and I, what we do is, we obviously are educators. We love education. We love talking to people about education. But we also are fans of beer. So we're both well versed in beer. We're geeks about beer. We're not experts by any means, but we always start each episode out with, what are you drinking? So he and I will exchange what we're drinking, talk a little bit about it, and then we start getting into the geeky side of it a little bit. And then guests that come on, we always ask them if they want to, they can always bring one as well. We don't require you to drink a beer. We've had people come on and drink wine. We've had people come on and drink water. So it doesn't matter. We don't discriminate what you drink. But we get into a non-scripted conversation about what people are passionate about, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses may be. So, and then we have a lot of fun with that. And then at the end, we always do a learn about segment where we take part of beer culture or beer knowledge and just kind of school you up a little bit on it. So like going way back to episode 1, that was, what's the difference between an ale and a lager? So things like that. But then we're starting to get into some obscure stuff now, like different kinds of hops or like really obscure forms of beer. But it's 90% education, 10% beer about.
Well, that's actually really interesting, right? Because, if they come to the podcast thinking it's a beer podcast, they stay because it's an amazing conversational education podcast. Yeah. They still get a little bit of that beer at the end.
Absolutely.
Right?
So, yep. So
now, Kyle, like you've surpassed the 100 episode mark just a while back. So you've had lots of episodes, lots of guests, lots of topics. Can you think about? I know it's hard. Think about maybe your favorite conversation that you had, like maybe oh, I never thought of that, or oh man, I can't believe I'm listening to this right now because it's so good.
Wow, that yeah, because we're about 125 episodes deep, and we've had so many incredible conversations with so many people from all over the world, really. So it started out where our initial guests were California, Nevada. We're based in Nevada, and then all of a sudden we get on our guest form, we get somebody from outside of Toronto, Ontario. And then we've had a guest from Austria on there. And then all over the United States and Canada, we've had guests. And it's so, I can't narrow down just one single conversation because A, just so many of them are so good, and B, that many episodes, they're I don't want to say they're all running together, but they're kind of running together at this point. So, but I will say though, I've met some incredible people through that podcast. Lainey Rowell, she was in Meet the Authors. I don't know if she's in here right now. I met her in person for the first time today. She was a guest on Beer EDU a few months back. So yes, great conversations, meeting some amazing people, and we always say if nobody listened anymore, we're still going to do it because we're selfish and we want to learn from others.
No, I mean I've heard. I don't think I've heard all 125 of the podcast, but I've heard plenty. And one of the things that I absolutely love, right, is the way that you and Ben kind of feed off of each other, and you're able to have a conversation with your guests as if you've known each other forever. Did that conversational style of a podcast, did that come out perfect right out the gate, or did it take a few episodes to feel the groove?
No, our first few episodes was a lot of technical difficulties just getting the recording going, and then our very first one, we recorded it was about 15 minutes, and then we realized we forgot to hit record, so then we had to do the whole thing over again, which 15 minutes, no big deal. But I would say though that, especially in the early episodes, it was just he and I, where the first, I think like 8 episodes or so, it was just the two of us, and that's when we decided to branch out and do guests. So those first 8 episodes they may sound pretty ugly now, but that was us finding our groove, and then once guests came in, that's what it became at that point. And I mentioned non-scripted conversation. We asked the guests to provide us with a topic they would like to talk about, their passion, whatever, and we literally go from that. We do nothing else, no writing of questions or whatever. We may look at like a website or social media ahead of time, but other than that, we go into them blind for the most part and just talk. And some of the episodes, they get up over an hour sometimes because the conversations are just that good.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard some of those longer ones, and they don't sound like an hour, right? And that's when a great conversation is happening. Now, Kyle, can you tell our audience here and at home where they can find your podcast?
So you can find the Beer EDU podcast on all the podcast apps, on Apple, it's on Spotify, it's on Stitcher. So anywhere you listen, we have a website, beeredupodcast.com, where you can learn more about the show. There's a guest form there that you can fill out if you want to be a guest on the show. And we do live stream when we record our episodes. We don't do a lot of press on those, but if you happen to be on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, we have channels for all of those. And if you follow them, you'll get notifications when we're going to do it. So you can kind of see how the sausage is made, I guess you could say.
I love it, Kyle. Thank you so much, my friend. All right. You may see him back up here again for another podcast he does as well, but we'll see if we have time. Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, my friend. All right, next we have, this is a great title, right? Because we all need our caffeine. Come on up, Stacy, for the Cappuccino Mic Drop podcast. Come on up to the stage. Stacy, how are you? Oh, it is so great to finally meet you in person.
Yes, thank you.
I know that a lot of you are going to say that. Like, oh, finally get to meet you in person, right? So, Stacy, tell me a little bit about your podcast.
Yes, so I'm Stacy Cradeville, and I teach at a high school called Cappuccino High School in San Bruno, California. It's like the coffee, but spelled different. And I am an instructional technology TOSA and a PE teacher. So weird combo there. I'm kind of a unicorn, but PE and tech do go together sometimes. And I had this goal of creating a place for teachers to share and really learn from each other. So it wasn't like the tech person always putting out tech tips, right? I'm not the only expert in the room. Everyone's an expert at something. And I wanted to really connect teachers with each other. So over the summer, I had this goal of creating some PD with digital badges and having people share, and I was going to give out prizes to people that like volunteered to lead workshops. I thought it was going to be great. And then school started in August, and we're all still in survival mode. Ain't nobody got time for that. No one wants to read another email or contribute to my collaborative Wakelet. So I learned really quickly to change gears, and I went back to the drawing board and thought, what else can I do that's still going to be of service of other teachers? What can I do to connect people and help us learn from one another that doesn't require more work? I wanted to make it as easy as possible. So I thought maybe I should just go talk to teachers and ask them what they're doing in the classroom and record it, package it neatly, and share it out with the world. So that's how I came up with the cappuccino mic drop, and it's been really helpful. The fun parts of the podcast have just been talking to people because we've all been in our silo for too long, even before the pandemic. We talk to our department, we talk to our PLC, we say hello in the office, and we talk a little bit in passing, but we're not sitting down going, hey Joe, what did you teach third period? And tell me about that tool that my students are still talking about when they get to PE, right? We don't get that deep when we're just talking in passing. So sitting down and interviewing a teacher deeply about their content or a strategy that they're using has really been a lot of fun. Some of the challenges of hosting your own podcast is just finding time to do it, right? And finding time within the school day to meet with teachers. I'm trying to do it during their prep. Or I got the principal on board to allow me to schedule some of these interviews during our PLC collaboration time, which is clutch. But it's been really awesome, and I actually have a link on the screen here, bit.ly, to a project website that kind of outlines my whole journey of starting this podcast. I just started it this year. And so if you're interested in starting a podcast, you think that it might be powerful for your school, I've documented the whole journey. I was part of the Merit program through the Krause Center for Innovation. KCI has a table out in the hallway. If you're here in person, go check them out. Because I had a lot of support and a cohort of people cheering me on as I did it. So I highly recommend signing up for anything through KCI.
Now, Stacy, one thing you said that really resonated with me is, you're creating all these resources for your teachers, and when we create resources, we get so excited. You're like, oh my goodness, this is gonna change the classroom. They're gonna love it. You're thinking there's gonna be, angels singing and the skies. You're like, yes, and you hand it to them maybe if I get to it. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
But creating a podcast to go and see what your teachers are actually doing, putting the spotlight on their talents and everything they're doing, that sounds amazing. Yes. But what was it like when you first started doing this? Did you go hey, can I record you? I mean, like when you walk into the classroom and ask for them to tell their story or talk, what was that first reaction the first couple of times before the ball started to roll?
Yeah, I did kind of have to talk to some friends, teacher friends, hey, what do you think of this idea? Am I totally stupid? And they were like, no, that sounds amazing. And so I did kind of have to get my feet wet and see is this gonna be okay? And once I started actually asking people to be on it, I would explain my whole spiel. I would be like, hey, we've all been apart for so long. We all need to hear what we're doing in other classrooms. I want to steal all your ideas. Can I talk to you and interview? And some people were like, oh, I'm so nervous. That sounds really scary. And I was like, oh, we're just going to talk over Zoom, and I'm going to record it, and I'll edit it and make you sound super amazing and smart. And when I put it in those terms, people really came around and said no problem, let's do it. I mean, people don't have time to be curating resources to share, but they all made time to sit down and talk to me for 30 minutes.
Now, is there a plan to expand beyond cappuccino and for you to do more interviews outside? Maybe some of your KCI cohort friends or other local high schools, or even sharing this out to the other local high schools and say, listen to what we're doing. I would love to bring you on board as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I never thought I would have a podcast. I'm a teacher. It wasn't in my dreams of life to become a podcaster. It just kind of worked out that it filled a need that I saw at my school. So yeah, now it is expanding. There's people across the district that are listening. There's all kinds of people tuning in and listening. So it definitely will start to expand. I recently interviewed a colleague of mine that doesn't teach at Cappuccino, but so it is already kind of heading in that direction. But I just really want to make it valuable for the teachers at my school, and I know that audience is growing and growing. So as more and more people start to hear about it, the content is going to start to get more and more grand scale, I suppose.
Grand scale. It's going to snowball.
We're blowing up.
And blow it up. Yes, I love that. Now, the last thing that I want to ask is, has this brought your staff closer together, right? Because we are in our silos, right? We get in our class at 7 in the morning. We're getting ready for that first class. We're so busy helping students at lunch, we don't get to leave. And by the time we leave at 3 o'clock, it's like, I've only seen 8th graders all day long, right? And we're like, do I even have a staff that I work with? It's like, has it brought people together where they finally go I didn't even know you worked here?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I said the fun part was talking to teachers, but the other fun part is hearing them talk to each other about the podcast. We would be on Zoom for a faculty meeting, and people are in the chat oh, did you hear episode 3? You got to go back and listen to episode 3 with Dan. And then before, an in-person meeting, people are outside of the hallway hey, I just heard your episode, and you need to tell me more about that topic. Let's meet up sometime. Or, hey, I just heard that yours came out today. I can't wait to listen to it. And hearing those conversations, really gives me the validation that this was a good idea.
No, I absolutely love it. It's not only bringing your staff together, but it's giving your staff a voice to be pushed out to the ether, and now they are becoming just, their talents and time is now probably affecting more and more students, and you gave them that avenue. So I want to say thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's
absolutely.
amazing.
Someone asked me recently how I pick and choose teachers to be on the podcast. I pick the people that my students tell me they like their class. And why, and the teachers that don't normally speak at professional development, right? Because everyone isn't always on stage talking about the great things they're doing, but everyone's got great things that they're doing. So.
No, absolutely. I love it. I love it. Stacy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Everybody, the Cappuccino Mic Drop podcast, find it, listen to it, share that idea with your staff. That's an amazing, amazing way to bring your staff closer together. All right, next on the stage, Marcus Chelsea with the Teacher podcast. Welcome them to the stage. Give it up. First off, Marcus. Oh my goodness. I love it. I love it. That hat is
this
amazing.
On? Good.
So, Marcus Chelsea, tell me, teacher. Number one, is it called teacher because there's 2 of you? And number 2, is it teacher because teachers are so amazing, you got to say that twice just so to make sure people hear teacher?
The name is almost kind of like a play on the show Sister. Sister. Teacher. It's catchy, it's undone, and it's exactly what our podcast focuses on. The target audience is obvious. We wanted to make it really obvious who it's for. There is no guessing. It's teacher. Teacher.
Is that the theme song? Because that's amazing. I think that's got to start being the theme song right there.
We might do a little remix.
We can come up with a jingle.
Yeah, we'll do a remix.
And we're both former teachers as well, so we wanted to make it personable. We know where you're coming from. We know what you're going through. So talking to teachers by teachers.
Now so you're interviewing teachers. So how are you grabbing? I don't want to say grabbing. How are you bringing teachers on board?
I'm just excited.
Oh, okay.
I'm just
like,
excited.
Oh no. Did you have a teacher guest?
Listen, this is what I do. Honestly, fun fact, Chelsea and I met for the first time in person a month ago.
Yeah.
So
I thought you were going to say right now.
Well, yeah. We met each other virtually, and it was this instant ability to disarm people around us. Everyone we meet, it's your shoulders drop. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the outfit, the hat, I don't know, the colors. But we both have that in common, that no matter who we speak to, the shoulders drop. And that gift is something that we like to share on our podcast, no matter who we interview. And so on the podcast, it's some teachers, like Steve Martinez, shout out,
Cue
Shout out.
emerging teacher of the year.
Favorite episode, just saying. But you'll also see some folks like Steve Burns from Blue's Clues. Shout out to Steve Burns. You'll also see folks like Jerry Chang and Adam Bello, who did Breakout EDU. So we try to focus not just on teachers, but folks who will talk about things that teachers care about in the now.
Now, when you bring the guests on, do you know what they're going to talk about? Or is it just like a spontaneous, like, you know what, we're going to, kind of feel each other out. We're going to start a conversation, and we're just going to see where this thing goes.
It's kind of both. We do give them a topic that we're going to talk about, but with Marcus and I, it leads its way sometimes down rabbit holes, but it usually is just what they want to talk about, what we feel. We do come in with some questions that we have in our mind, but I find myself sitting there and I'm like, wait, you just brought up a great point, and let's kind of go off of that.
I love it. I mean, so it's very malleable, right?
Yes.
And conversational,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And I love that, right? Because, I mean, just like in our classrooms, we have like an agenda, and if we try to stick to that agenda, we miss out on the amazingness that happens in the spaces.
Yes.
Right? In between, what could happen, because we got to get through the agenda. But you being malleable and say, wait. Let's see where that takes us.
And that's literally what Marcus will say in the episodes. He's like,
I'm
wait.
Hold up.
Circle back.
Also, when it's published, the live recording is not what is published because I veer way off task. I also burp a lot, and so like I don't want the burps on the podcast, but also like I want every moment to be recorded. So we'll sit in the recording virtually for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, just running it, getting to know the person, talking, hey girl, hey, and we choose the moments to kind of like encapsulate into the episode.
So hear me out.
Come on.
You need to do bonus episodes.
Here we go.
Ready? Called Teacher Prep Room. Right? So it's just the different little outtakes. But it doesn't have to be full on things,
Yeah.
but just little,
we need
things.
bloopers because he
Little
does
bloopers.
burp. He's like, I need to burp,
Just
and then we just
call
stop.
it prep time. Teacher prep time.
I love that.
That'd be good. That'd be
We
so
might have to
fun.
put like an age disclaimer on that.
Yeah, sometimes.
So how do you, I don't want to say choose your guests, but how do the guests know about this show? And like, do you have a form they can fill? Like, hey, I heard this show, I want to be a part of it. Do you have a call out? How would somebody like in the audience, I want to be on that show. I want to be Marcus's best friend, and I want to talk to him for hours. Like, how do they get on your show? I'm trying to say, how do I get on your show?
Like this. Like
Yeah.
everything, every guest we've had so far has been organic. It's been, oh, I know this person in my PLC. Oh, I know somebody who might know somebody. Or I'm meeting you now. You're going to be next.
All right.
Yes.
You're going to be next.
Yes, we
Write
need
that down.
Joe.
Write that down. But we use an organic approach. We use our PLCs. We use people we know, people who refer, oh, I know somebody who'd like to talk about that. There isn't a form yet, but I think I might steal that idea
that's a
from
good
like
option.
the previous speakers. But you're next.
Well, I am down. We are going to do it. It's going to be fantastic. Marcus, Chelsea, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is great.
I gotta go.
No, well, if you know what, there's another, so you can sit there the whole time. I'm
Okay.
enjoying this so much.
All right.
Now, the teacher, okay, we'll keep going.
Come
so,
on, come on.
So, the last thing I want to ask you is, last thing, and it's hard to ask this question. I asked it to Kyle, and he couldn't do it. Favorite,
I know.
one.
I know you asked him that, and I was like, I hope he asked because I have a favorite.
I have to. Favorite episode, what was it?
So our very first episode is with a teacher. Her name is Christina Costa. She is a PhD candidate. She teaches undergrad in Michigan. She's 27. She had a grapefruit-sized tumor in her brain and continued teaching. It gives me chills talking about her. She continued teaching. She did 12 rounds of chemo. Her entire mantra, life, everything is do everything with gratitude. So even if you're going through something hard, what is something of that day that made you feel grateful? She has a TED Talk, so shout out to Christina Costa about gratitude. I love her dearly.
Awesome.
One day I hope to meet her in person.
And you
but
said that's like episode one.
Episode
The
one.
first
Episode one, everybody go start.
Yeah.
We don't normally say start at episode one for your podcast. There's lots of them. But start at episode
Start at-
one. Teacher, where can they find your podcast?
Oh, you can just Google search Teacher Podcast. It's going to come up. You'll see us.
Spotify.
It's also on all platforms, so like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Just look for us. We're also on YouTube, so we stream everything. And so like you get to see our face. You get to see me act the fool during the podcast.
What's your favorite one, quickly? Because I feel like I took
my favorite
too
one
much.
is the one with Steve. I'm sorry.
Steve Martinez.
Steve Martinez has an episode with us, and like it's about project-based learning and the mindset behind it. And I never did know PBL. I mean, I don't know nothing about that. And so for me, it was a moment to sit back and listen, which is something I don't do well. And I enjoyed learning from him. It was more of a learning experience. So thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thank
Excellent.
you.
Well, everybody, give it up for the Teacher podcast.
Thank you.
Marcus and Chelsea, thank you so much for being on the stage and the show. Thank you so much. You better connect with me so we can do that recording. All right. All right, everybody. This is going great. It's going fantastic. You notice I built in buffer time, right, for people just like Marcus. Okay. So next. Okay, Tisha was just up here for Meet the Author, so I hope she talks about her book. She is amazing. Make Learning Magical podcast. Tisha, welcome to the show. Oh my goodness, it is great to see you. All right, so for those who have not read your book or have listened to your podcast, just the name, Make Learning Magical, just makes me jump with joy. I hope it does for you as well. But tell us, what is the podcast about, and how did you come up with the theme and the content?
Right. So the name of the podcast matches my book, Make Learning Magical. And, it started back about 3 years ago, and I had a conversation with Adam Welcome, who is an author, and he encouraged me to just start doing something new and different and having conversations with people. And I thought, oh gosh, that sounds really scary. I don't know if I want to do this. And the funny thing about it was I decided to accept the challenge on a car ride up to Portland, Oregon to see my daughter with my husband. And Adam had told me about the Anchor app, and so I downloaded it on my phone, and I asked my husband if he wanted to be my first guest on the podcast, and literally that's how it started. I was on a drive up to Portland, Oregon, and I did my first episode with my husband, and it was so much fun just to try it. And I think the first 3 or 4 episodes was with him having conversations just about education. He's an educator as well. And then I started branching out, and as many have shared, just reaching out to your PLN. And I have established such an amazing professional learning network through Twitter especially, and so many people that just inspire me every day. And I just wanted to have conversations with them. I wanted to learn more about what they do and just learn myself. And it has been so much fun. And I think the most amazing thing is that it's just been a journey. Like, I started out literally in my car recording on Anchor, and I have just become, just a better communicator, I think, through the process. It was definitely a leap out of my comfort zone. But through the pandemic, having those conversations when we were all feeling so isolated was just always just uplifting and inspiring to me, and it just helped me feel more connected. And so I've just been so grateful for all of the guests that have been on the show to share the amazing things that they're doing, and it's just amazing to be able to amplify their voices. And so it's been just an honor to be able to do that.
What it sounds like to me is that you created the podcast to talk to amazing people, right?
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of us do that. We do it so we're like, oh man, I want to talk to that person or that person or that person. But one of the other things you said that really resonated with me is, during the pandemic, a lot of us did feel very isolated. And for me, recording the podcast, it really allowed me to not feel that way anymore, because I'm talking with somebody else, and I know that other people are going to be listening to those words. It made me feel connected when I felt disconnected most of the time. Did you get that same feeling and that same rush when you were recording for those kind of reasons?
100%. Every time. I just loved so much every single conversation, and I felt like I got to know those guests, even if I had known them through social media or maybe even met them at a conference. Having those conversations in the podcast episodes just made me feel, first of all, like I connected to them more, that I wasn't so isolated as an educator. But then I learned all of these amazing things. I'm learning all the time that I can bring into my own practice to make me a better educator, to help me be a better person, leader. And so, yeah, it's definitely a wonderful way to connect.
Yeah, collecting those ideas, right, and being able
Yes.
to put them into your toolbox is incredibly powerful. And then your listeners are able to collect
Yes.
those. You're almost like a pass-through. You're like a digital Lowe's, handing out all these tools to people by listening. And as we all know, to have a really great, effective lesson building plan, you need amazing tools. Even though most of us were having to build mansions out of all these tools during this time.
Absolutely.
What I loved is the origin story of the podcast, because when people are listening to podcasters, they are probably assuming they're in like a sound studio, there's like a soundboard, they got a headset on, they got this microphone coming down from this boom arm, and you started it in your car,
Yeah.
right? Driving down the road, just, there's an Anchor app, record.
Right.
Are you able, like, do you tell people that origin story a lot? Because I think that empowers the audience to go, well, if she could do it in a car, I could do it in my chair, right?
100%. And I do share that story, and I love listening back to those first episodes and just seeing the progression of my journey. And sometimes at first I thought, oh, this is embarrassing, I should erase. I'm like, no, like, this is my story. Like, I am a work in progress. And so to hear that very first episode where you hear semis going by, the audio is definitely rough because I was in a car. I love that. I love that I started somewhere, and then I have just improved as I've gone. And I've found different tools. Like, I started using Squadcast to record. I started using GarageBand to do my editing, where those first episodes weren't edited at all. And I love that. And I just think that we are continuously learning and growing, and we have to start somewhere.
Yeah, the idea of evolving your craft,
Yes.
it happens because of the joy of doing the work that you're doing. And you're like, these tools will make that experience more joyful.
Absolutely.
And it also sounds to me a little bit like maybe these podcasts allow you to collect some information for maybe a Make Learning Magical book number 2.
You never
Is that
know.
something that's coming down the pipe? Is that something that might be magical information that people should know about?
I don't have anything set in stone, but I'm always thinking about, what else I can do to help amplify my impact and make learning magical for everyone, so you never know.
Well, I have to tell you this. I absolutely love your book, right? And I listen to the podcast because of the book. And they go together very, very well. So everybody, you don't have to buy the book to listen to the podcast, or listen to the podcast to buy the book, but I do recommend they are a very good pair. They go together like peanut butter and jelly, right? So definitely take a look. All right, Tisha, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much. Tisha, everybody, the Make Learning Magical podcast, definitely tune in. Find it wherever your pods are casted. All right, so here we go. Next, Real Teaching 101. Lauren, come on
I'm just
up.
going to come up with the mic like I belong here.
Like you belong
Hi.
here. Everybody, yes. Wave to everybody. You do belong here. Everybody.
Woo!
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. All right, let's talk a little bit about Real Teaching 101. And so right away, it sounds like a freshman college course, right?
Yes, it's like we intentionally named it that way. Have you ever had those moments where you're like, why didn't anybody teach me this? I spent 3 hours or 3 courses on lesson plan writing. And then I sit down to do it, and 10 minutes later it goes out the window because some kid talks. So we wanted to do Real Teaching 101 because it's the stuff your teacher prep program didn't prepare you for in a perspective of educators who were in the classroom, like the other group talked about, who know where you are, been what you're going through, and have come out of the pandemic on the other side, still in education.
You know, I love that theme because real teaching is messy, right? Real teaching, when you go to your college courses and you learn about, creating your agendas and creating your lesson plans and the step-by-steps and all of these, you're absolutely right. Right away, if it doesn't go that way and you're not willing to change and adapt and move, you might get a little bit flummoxed, right? And so this sounds like you're telling those stories. You're telling those truths. So people know real teaching is messy, but getting messy is half the fun part. Right?
Exactly. Our most recent episode was about why you need to preview the YouTube video before you show it, and like what happens when that was not the lesson that you learn. But we just really wanted to amplify teachers' voices, because what we saw in the pandemic was, at the start, a lot of people who were like, teachers, you're the best, thank you so much. And then towards the middle, they were saying, you're lazy, you don't want to do anything, you don't want to go back to school. And honoring the experiences that those teachers were going through, especially the ones who were considering leaving, and feeling like I need to connect with somebody. I need somebody who knows those stories about what it's like to be messy, what it's like when a kid tells you they hate you even though they really don't, but those really inherent things that teaching is all about, the stories that happen when you're in the ground, in the trenches, doing the work.
Yeah, you're right, because if you look at a bell schedule, right? It says school starts at 8:30 and ends at 3. It's the dash that is the teaching,
yes.
Right? I think there's a saying, it's, life happens in the dash. Teaching happens in the dash, and it gets messy, right? And tell me if I'm wrong, but on Twitter, sometimes to me, that's some of the problems with the stories that I hear, is that you hear the end result story, the happy part of the story. You don't hear the 20 times it didn't work. You hear the last time that it did. Right?
Yes, or the stories of the teachers who they make their classroom look so Pinterest ready. But what about the ones who walk in because they were hired the day before and they're not Pinterest ready? What do they do? And so that was the other element that we wanted to bring, is that teaching is not always about the glorious magic, but the messiness that happens in there as well.
Now, tell me a little bit about maybe some, do you have guests? Do you have guests that come on?
We do. So I do this podcast with two of my teacher friends, both of whom I have worked with, but they haven't worked with each other. I'm sort of the linchpin in all of this. But we have had guests. We have had on Daphne Gomez, who runs the Teacher Career Coach course, and her big thing was about transitioning teachers. We've had on people, or we're going to, about financial literacy for adults, like saving for retirement, and what do you do when your school doesn't pay you over summer vacation. And we've had on Kamal Shah, who is an author on mindfulness and mindfulness for teachers and for students.
Now, right now, there's a huge conversation about making sure that teachers are mindful about taking time for themselves, right? Not like Ken was talking about today during his keynote. You don't have to take home bags and bags of homework or stuff. You need to spend time with your family. You need to spend time with yourself. You talk about any of that, SEL, mindfulness of teachers, taking care of yourself.
It's like you segue perfectly into one of our segments.
Yes!
Our very last segment that we like to do is called Anti-PD, because what's worse than a professional development that offers you 0 helpful tips for your everyday teacher life? So we like to take the topic of our show and codify it down into 3 practical tips that teachers can take. So if we were talking about boundaries, for instance, my podcaster, Megan, she likes to talk about not putting your email on your phone. So that way when you leave, you've left work, it doesn't follow you there. It'll sit with you until the morning when you're rested and way more ready to handle it.
Well, that's a very good tip, because, well, number one, if you hear that ding on your phone, you're going to answer it.
You got to answer it.
You have to answer it. My wife, she cannot go to sleep unless her inbox says 0. And she gets super antsy when she sees my inbox has 17,828
How
unread
do you
emails.
operate like that? I can't stand
well,
that.
it's a Gmail. If I want to find something, I just Google it. It'll pop right up in my email. But being able to disconnect when you go home is very important. Have you heard any of your guests, or maybe even yourself, here that work-home boundary became blurred during the pandemic? Because for a lot of teachers, their home became work, so their work became home, and that boundary became blurred. When did they stop? Do you hear about that?
Absolutely. We hear it all of the time, especially with ourselves. And what else am I going to do? I can't go anywhere, so I may as well grade what I've got in front of me, because what else am I doing? But in that service and doing that, you just set the expectation that you're going to work at all hours of the morning, whenever, because you don't have a life. When you do, and when you take care of yourself and you fill your cup, you're going to be better for everybody. We also like to say you can't pour from an empty cup, so you have to be really realistic about what habits you've developed as a teacher. And if you're not happy with them, it's totally possible to change and still be a teacher and still be effective with it.
You said at the end of your podcast, you have like a couple different tips, some practical tips. Can you give us some of your top tips that you have said? Like maybe, 5 of them that you think has really resonated with your audience or resonated with yourself after you heard or said them?
Absolutely. I think one, taking email off of your phone or not bringing work home. Leave the end of the day and leave it there, it'll come back. The other one is finding some sort of outlet that's not associated with your teacher identity. Art, exercise, pottery, underwater basket weaving, whatever it is that differentiates you from being other than a quote teacher. And the other one is celebrate the skills that you have, because so many teachers fall into the I'm just a teacher category. And speaking for myself and my journey, that's sort of how I ended up in podcasting. I'm like, no, I'm more than a teacher. I can talk, I can edit, I can use technology, watch me. So finding those things that make your skill set so much more elevated because you're a teacher.
And I think you segued great to the conference. That's the beauty of
teamwork.
Q, right? Is you get to come and listen to those tips and tricks, those tools, those skills, those pedagogical practices that may save you time, that may save your sanity, that will amplify student learning and engagement and excitement, but at the same time not put more onto your plate. I'll tell you, some of the saddest things I've ever seen on a school campus is a Friday with a teacher having that cart that you fold up,
oh my gosh, and it's filled with papers.
Filling with papers, and you go, what are you doing? I have so much grading to do this weekend. That is so sad.
Don't grade on the weekend.
Don't grade on the weekends, right? Especially if the Niners are playing. You're definitely going to
come talk to me. I'll tell you what not to grade. The secret's going to be throw it away.
Now, the secrets can be found where?
They can be found on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and then another shameless plug that I got. I have a second podcast called Cafeteria Confidence, which is the SEL podcast your teen or tween doesn't know that they want to listen to, and for the inner teen and tween in you. So we talk about motivation, we talk about exercise, stress, all of those SEL topics that you might not get in a regular classroom in a very adult teenage woman type of environment.
I love that. Now, I wish we could talk more about that one because I have so many questions about that one now as well.
Well, I can stay up here if you'd like.
Because the next podcast is mine, and that doesn't have to happen. I want to hear a little bit more about this. Okay, so this other pod, the Cafeteria
Confidence. Because life is a lunchroom.
I love that.
I know.
Yeah,
it's like I taught English for a while
my
and
goodness.
I'm good at metaphors.
So is that podcast, is the audience teenagers?
Yes, teens, tweens, and the people who love them. So parents, teachers, caregivers.
And do you share this with other educators? Because I would love to see if maybe teachers can incorporate maybe having the students listen to that podcast and then have classroom conversations about it, see what resonated with them.
We haven't done fully there yet, but hey, this is my opportunity to throw it out into the world. Listen today. We've got tons of episodes. But yes, that was our idea because so many of the podcasts that are used in the classroom, which are really great, are like the NPR style ones through some of the programs that are out there. And it's not something that speaks to the adolescent experience from the way that we remember it, and we're far removed from it, but we still remember what it was like, and we really believe in equipping young people to be empowered so that they don't have to end up being the people who are like, why didn't anybody tell me that either?
So I love that because I have listened to lots of education podcasts. I've listened to a lot of amazing stories and amazing journeys and just amazing everything. I've never heard one for teenagers.
Well, now you have.
And who are we teaching towards? We're teaching towards our young students. Why not? I love that idea. I think that is gold. I think Real Teaching 101 is absolutely needed. I think the Cafeteria
Confidence.
I just keep doing it so they can listen. Right? The Cafeteria Confidence podcast is something that we can all listen to, even our younger ones.
Yes, and we often say that sometimes we do it for ourselves, those types of topics where we didn't know that we needed it, but in the process of researching it and talking about it, we were like, hey, that was a really great tip that we learned. Like we were talking about motivation in our last podcast, and I ended up diving into Simon Sinek's Start With Why, and it was sort of then this whole rabbit hole of motivation and how you can actually get that motivation from yourself by asking other people what they see in you, which is something that if I was a young person, I would have liked to hear what they see in me that I don't see in myself.
I love it. And do you have any, can you tell if the listeners of your podcast are that target audience, or do they write you fan email? Well, they don't. I guess they wouldn't write fan. Do they send you fan TikToks?
No, they don't, because I'm too scared of TikTok. But we've heard from people who are parents who say it really helps them understand that their kids a little bit more. It helps them relate to it. We've heard from some of the students that have teachers who have used it, and they say that it makes them feel like their experience is not isolated. Because when you're in middle school, you can feel like that it only happens to me. But then when you hear an adult, let alone an adult talking honestly about what their experience was like. I share a story about how I threw up in an exercise class once and was totally embarrassed. But it's like, oh, if that can happen to her and she's still alive and standing and laughing about it, I can deal with whatever it is that I'm going through too.
I love that. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for coming up here. Thank you so much for sharing both podcasts.
Thanks for
Everybody
letting me.
listen to those podcasts wherever your pods are casted. Find it, favorite it, listen to it, and can they on there, can they connect with you in some way so that they can say how much they love it?
Yes, so we've got all of the things except for TikTok, because like I said, I'm too scared of it, but we're on Twitter and Instagram at Real Teaching 101 for my educator friends out there, and on Instagram at Cafeteria Confidence Pod for Cafeteria Confidence. And then I'm really active on LinkedIn. I feel like LinkedIn doesn't get a ton of love for teachers, but I am there. You can absolutely connect with me. Lauren Pinto. I wear a cute star dress in my picture. You'll know me by the adorable face that I have too. So.
All right, everybody give it up for Lauren. She has a fantastic podcast. You have to listen to them. Thank you so much for being here. It was amazing to meet you in person. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, you got two podcasts there for the price of one, and that cost, the first one didn't cost anything, so there you go. All right, so the last podcast we're gonna talk about is the podcast by the Sons of Technology. That is a podcast that myself and Kyle Anderson, come on up to the stage. Kyle and I created this podcast because we had, should we sit down?
We can sit down.
Okay.
Let's sit down.
Yeah, all right. So we had a Twitter group called the EdTech Army, and it's all about educators willing to kind of buck the system. I said buck the system, and educators who are willing to do things differently, educators who are willing to swerve out of the lane, because we always say that you can't be a leader if you're following in line. Right? The people that are remembered throughout history and education are the ones that stepped out and did something a different way. And so in our Sons of Technology group, we talk about all the ways that we're doing that. And one day, Kyle came to me and he's like, dude, the conversations we have in this group need to be told outside this group. He goes, why don't we do a podcast? He had just started the Beer EDU podcast. And I'm like, well, I don't know how to start a podcast. Can you run with that and then just invite me to it? He's like, yeah, let's do that. Is that the same way that you remember it, Kyle?
Pretty close.
Pretty close?
Yeah, pretty close. So it started as, at first, we were going to take some of those conversations and do a session at, I believe it was Tech Rodeo.
Rodeo in Tulare County,
yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And the conversation went from like a set of Google Slides and us talking about it to like, this can be a podcast. And it was our second episode. It was actually a live recording at that conference.
And it was absolutely fun to do that. We had audience participation.
Yeah.
And Kyle and I were like, this is great. How are we going to do this each week? And so what we decided to do was this. We would come up with topics within our group, and we'd throw the topic out to the group. Like, hey, this is a topic we want to do next week. If this topic resonates with you, if you're passionate about it, you have something to say about it, here's the link, and we're going to all meet at 9 o'clock on Sunday or 9 o'clock on Saturday, and we're going to record. And so sometimes it'd be 3 of us. Sometimes, I think the biggest one we had, there was 10 of us all talking about, I believe it was computer science in all subjects. And we just talk like teachers talking shop. And how are we going to implement this? And how would we implement this if we had all the power in the world to do that? And so we never say that we have guests on our show. We say that we have members. And so every single person who comes on the show gets added to the EdTech Army group in our Twitter channel, and they are gifted a Sons of Technology t-shirt. And yes, we've made Daughters of Technology t-shirts as well, and we make EdTech Army t-shirts as well. So if you would like to see any of those stickers, you may have them. We brought them for you. You can take them. But we are an all-inclusive group. We have fantastic conversations from all different perspectives. We don't always agree either. And then sometimes Kyle and I actually play the devil's advocate just to spice things up a little bit and see what our fellow members during the show will say. Yeah. I always remind people, like people see us in our jackets and they're like, oh, these tough guys, they must be doing this or that. But the whole idea of the podcast came from a passage that I heard at my church one Sunday. And the passage said, we are all sons of light and daughters of day. We will not give up. We will keep moving forward. We will speak encouraging words to one another. We will lift each other up, leave nobody behind. I know you're already doing it, so keep on doing it. And that's what we all do as educators. That's what we all do at Q. We are here to lift each other up. We are here to ensure that everybody has a voice. We are here to ensure that we're not going to leave you behind. We are going to bring you into our group. We are going to love on you. We're going to respect you, and we are going to be your best friends. And I say to everybody, you know, whether they're in our sessions or in our audiences, I go, after we've connected like this, we are now all best friends. So thank you so much for being my best friends, everybody. I appreciate that so much. Kyle and I love doing the podcast, but just like you, man, there's so much work that we have to do, right? So we used to do a podcast every 2 weeks, and then now we're kind of testing it out, just a big one every month. We might go back to 2 times a week if things die down a little bit. 2 times
a week?
No. 2 times a month. But as of right now, it's once a month. But we really enjoy it. And like I was telling to Lauren, it invigorates me. It invigorates me because, you know, I work from home with Q, and sometimes I really feel that loneliness of not working with the staff like I used to at my school site every single day. I don't have that classroom I can just walk into. And when Kyle jumps on the screen, it just brings joy to me. And that whole session is just a joyful session of us talking about how to change the world one student at a time. And that's basically what the crux of the Sons of Technology podcast is about. So if you'd like to be a guest on the show, remember, we don't have guests, we have members. Let us know. We would love to add new people to our group. We have lots of EdTech Army members here in the audience today as well. And so thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being a part of our PLN, a part of our family, and just being super amazing educators. But Kyle, I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. Anything that I missed, Kyle?
No, I think you got it. So I already talked enough at the beginning anyway.
Did.
So
yeah,
we're
you
good.
did. So I'll go ahead and talk some more. So everybody, that's our podcast. You can find I didn't even hit that button, I'm sorry. You can find our podcast wherever our pods are casted. We do have we do this live on StreamYard and then rip it and turn it into an audio for our podcast. But if you go to sonsoftechnology.com, that will take you directly to our YouTube channel, which we also have tips and tricks of how to use technology in the classroom. But we absolutely love doing our podcast. And I absolutely loved hearing all of our amazing podcasters. So what I would like to do is bring all the podcasters really quickly back up on stage to give them a round of applause for all the amazing work that they are doing. All the amazing work that they are doing in their groups. All right, so we're going to do a stage bow, right? So we're going to lock hands, if you're comfortable. Okay, here we go. And on 3, we're going to do our stage bow because you are amazing and you're the stars of everything. This. Sorry, I blanked right there. Okay, here we go. Everybody on 3. 1, 2, 3. Thanks, everybody. I've never done this before. All right. If you would like to talk to any of these podcasters, they're going to be right over here for a while. And if you have lots of conversation with them, there are tables in the vendor hall that you can chat with them. I'm sure they have stickers and swag to give away. But again, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your voices, encouraging other teachers to share their voices, and changing the world with those voices, because they are long-lasting and they will be there forever and ever until the internet goes down. Okay? All right, thanks everybody. Have a wonderful rest of Q, and stick around for Q Booms, because it's about to go off.